Podcast.
Hey, if a bureaucracy can do it, so can you. Hey, it's Scott Beebe with Business on Purpose. You are about to hear from Maria Walls. We've had the opportunity to work together here for the last few years. Maria is the treasurer of Beaufort County, and about 4.5, 5 years ago, she called us up and said, we need help. And they have put in the work. She and her team, Kimberly and George, and a variety of other people have put in this great work to build something really special. And so it's a business on purpose, small government edition. That's right, bureaucracy. Hey, by the way, make sure to check us out, mybusinessonpurpose.com. Lots of new powerful content right there on the homepage, mybusinessonpurpose.com. And I hope you enjoy this awesome interview to hear the background and how they've pushed through at the Beaufort County Treasurer's Office, leveraging the Business on Purpose process. All right, so the always spirited Maria Walls, we've had the opportunity to be able to work together. She and Kimberly and George and myself here over the last few years, and it has been, oh my gosh, the stories. I just had this flood of stories and roller coasters kind of go through my head of the things that you guys have been through over the last few years. So Maria, welcome to the Business on Purpose podcast. I just realized it's the first time you've been on here.
Yes, I am so excited to be joining you and talking about what we get to do in the BOP family.
Well, let's dive in. This week's a big week. At the time of this recording, we're in the midst of COVID, not just, well, I'm going to call it COVID round 2. We've actually heard of more people we know here in the last couple of weeks that they're getting tested in a variety of things. So at the time of this recording, oh my gosh, it's just pandemic and presidential elections and economy, and there's so many things going on. So let's take a step outside of all of that for a minute. And I want to go way back to Maria riding bikes and running on the streets. And where did you come from? We live in the low country of South Carolina. Nobody's from here. If you look back at a kind of a deep dive of your maiden name and where you're from and all that, you are not from the low country of South Carolina. So take us back to where Maria grew up, to the streets.
Oh my gosh. I'm from a little town called Pennington. It's in New Jersey, right outside of Princeton. And I always tell people, if you know where Washington crossed the Delaware, I was on the New Jersey side for the Battle of Trenton. So little history there. I am Greek. I grew up in a Greek family. And if you've seen my big fat Greek wedding, you know a short synopsis of what my life was like, because that is very accurate. In a lot of ways, my childhood, oh my goodness. I had amazing parents, and my grandparents talk a lot about generational differences in the workplace. And I am a millennial, but I act like a baby boomer. So that's interesting. My grandparents had a very big influence on my life. And, we're Greek, we're always together, big family. Lots of interesting debates, love, and excitement going on. So I definitely can say, as far as work is concerned, my dad had a really big influence on, I think, my work ethic, and my mom too. My mom's a peacemaker. For those of you that do the disc profile, my mom's a peacemaker, and my dad is like a black and white stereotypical D. He's so I have a lot of his traits. I am a D, and one of his favorite sayings was second place is first place loser. And so you didn't go home to my dad and be excited about your second place trophy, because that just didn't cut it. We think we were just so grateful to have opportunity. I'm only the second generation in America. My grandfather came to the United States with absolutely nothing. He grew up in a very poor town. We by our standards would call it very poor, if not destitute. His childhood, he left school second grade. He didn't finish his second grade education and went to work to earn money for his family. in a neighboring town in second grade. He slept under the steps of a taverna, which is like a little pub, just so he could be there the next morning to work because it wasn't worth walking back home to the next town over. So for those of your listeners with a second grader, imagine that. He came to this country with nothing. He cannot read or write correctly in English, let alone in Greek. And he retired a wildly successful person. And that experience really influenced all of us very strongly, because there wasn't a moment in our childhood, my father's childhood, that wasn't referenced. You got to go to school today. Do you know how lucky you are? I couldn't go to school. I was working. My family didn't have anything to eat. So your mom made a dinner you didn't like. Every complaint, every challenge, every triumph was measured against what his life experience was. So whatever was bad is really not that bad, and whatever is great is phenomenal by his standards. And yeah, we have a really great family, and
Yeah.
I'm grateful I had that opportunity, because so many people in our country, really, if you think about it, have had that in the United States. And
Yeah.
I'll leave it at this. When we would pray at night, go to bed as children would say our prayers, you prayed in the order of three things: God bless America, God bless Ilada, which is Greece, and God bless me. You were third on the totem pole.
What an interesting kind of perspective on life, even just found in those three things. So,
Yeah.
Maria, you guys are in an interesting class for who we typically work with. And we had the privilege of starting working with you guys early on. And I'll never forget, you called me. And I think one of your first three words was, "We need help." And as a background, and I will have given it at the beginning of our conversation as well, but you are the treasurer of basically a local county government, and you run the treasurer's office. You are the treasurer, and you have a team that works with you. And so whatever people can think about when they think about, in the United States, a local county or parish kind of bureaucracy office, governmental offices, that's your world every single day. And now I'm not going to paint you with that brush. All I'm doing is painting the wall and saying, hey, that's the background, that's the context, because I think we'll all get to hear from Maria about how they're doing things differently. But talk for just a second. Before you became the treasurer, what were you doing?
I was in public accounting. I was an auditor. So for those of your listeners who have an external auditor, I was the person who would come and perform the audit work, and then moved on eventually to supervising audit work. And that was my background. I was in the private sector working in public accounting from the time I left graduate school until the time I joined the treasurer's office.
Okay, so you walk into the treasurer's office, and you were an employee there. You were a team member there before you were the actual treasurer. So you had been in that office for a few years, and then you ran to become the elected treasurer. So in our county, treasurer is an elected official. Not all leaders of each of the offices in the county are that way, but in particular, the treasurer's office is. What in the world provoked you or stoked you to leave the private sector to come into public life, especially not as an elected official, but first as an employee?
That's actually very interesting. God has plans for you that you really don't see at the time. So I was working for a regional firm here in the county, and I was, when the real estate market crashed and we had the financial crisis, I was part of a layoff, and I didn't have a job. Now, I was interviewing, and I was working with a headhunter and was looking for a position, but I was not working. So I paint that picture to give you the magnitude of of how much I did not want to work in a government environment. I was unemployed, and I still did not want to apply for the treasurer's office. A friend of mine said, there was a newly elected treasurer. He had not yet been sworn in, and all she kept saying was, you should apply. You should call him. He's a great guy. Things are going to be different. And yeah, everybody says things are going to be different, but most people don't actually do it. And I have met far more bad leaders in my professional career and really life in general than I have great leaders. So in my mind, statistically unlikely, plus the government environment, not appealing to me. So I wasn't going to apply. And I started reading about him, and I gave him a call, and I just got this feeling, and I just thought, he just sounded like such a great person. So I applied, not because of the job, but because of him. And I interviewed, and I just got this overwhelming sense that this is where I belonged. And that was a complete 180 for me. I mean, I was not interested before that. And I really felt like that is where I was supposed to be. And at the end of the interview, he said, well, I only have one more thing to ask you. I said, okay, I'm happy to answer. He says, well, I'm not going to do this job forever. I only plan on doing 2 terms at the most. And whoever I hire to be my deputy, which is the number 2 role in the treasurer's office, whoever I hire as my deputy, I expect them to run in my place. I had no intention of running for public office. I had no intention of working in a government environment. This was not my plan. This was not what I was looking for. I said, well, I have to go home and talk to my husband about that because I thought I was just on a job interview. And I got in the car and I called Rich and I said, I'm going to be offered this job. And he's like, stop. He's a C. Stop. You don't know. That's not a fact. Don't get your hopes up. Don't, it might not happen. I said, no, I'm telling you, I feel it. This is right. But you have to be okay with me running for office. But in 8 years, we could be dead. 8 years is forever from now. And he only ran 1 term. And he told me that he wasn't running again when I was 6 months pregnant with our 2nd child. So it was either run for office or get a new boss. And he was one of those great leaders.
Yeah.
I don't know that I've ever worked for a better person. And
I love the intentionality that you made a decision around a person and not just around, I need a job, especially in the moment when you're laid off, you don't have an employment. I've been in that situation before, and you don't feel like you've got the luxury to pick and choose. But I felt like you kind of held to your, you go back to how you grew up. You had standards, you had values, and you held to those. All right. So you walk in, from a deputy position, you kind of had a lay of the land, and then you were elected. And so now you're Maria Walls, the treasurer, and you've come in and you're into this. We talk all the time about liberating business owners, and in your case, organizational leaders from chaos. What did chaos look like when you walked in? Not because the previous treasurer was a bad leader. It's just kind of inherent in local bureaucratic county leadership. What did chaos look like when you walked in the door in that particular role?
I think it was self-created chaos. We had a great organization. We had a great team. We had a great leader. And I was a great number 2. What I failed to recognize, because really, I'd never gone through that before. What I failed to recognize is how much our team dynamic would necessarily have to shift simply because I was changing roles. Our number 1 leader, our top leader, was leaving. So that his portion of the dynamic, what he influences in our dynamic, our team culture, that's gone. It's completely gone. And we were, on paper, complete opposite. But in actuality, we just balanced each other out so wonderfully. That dynamic's gone. And I need a balance. But I didn't know that about myself as well as I do now. And I definitely think that was my biggest thing I have ever learned. That my job as a leader is to know myself as well as I think I know my team, if not better. Because if you're not self-aware, you lack self-knowledge. If you don't know yourself, how is anybody else going to know you? How are you going to set your team up for success if you don't even understand yourself? So that I definitely did not appreciate how big of a shift that was going to cause. And then 2, I don't think I really realized how much I was doing as number 2. He was leading the vision and I was the doer. Well, now I have to lead the vision and stop being the doer. Well, what happens there? Who's going to do that? And I'm so blessed with an amazing team. Oh my God, they are a million times more valuable than I could ever be. But I didn't, we were all navigating this for the first time. So they're trying to become more doers, and they're C's. They want to do it because then they can trust the outcome, right? Because they did it themselves. But I had to relinquish that control. And as a D, again, referencing the DISC profiles, that was really hard for me to do. And so we have all these shifts in our dynamics happening that we're, positions now are opening up, who is going to be in that role, and just, again, an overall shift in dynamics. And I think that was my biggest shock, and it really shouldn't have been. But I thought we were just going to get back, I was sworn in, we're going to just get back to work.
It's
everything's still the
interesting.
same.
I wrote this down. You said chaos is self-generated, or you said something like that. And so it's almost as if you brought the chaos with you because of a potential lack of knowledge of just your own capability. But when you said it, actually, before you articulated it, actually made me think about chaos is self-generated because chaos just seems to live in bureaucracies. And so there's a self-generation within the bureaucracy, but then what you're saying is there's also a self-generation within your own unawareness of the things that either you're good at or the things that you're not good at. And so you've come in, you built this team. You guys actually were a great asset in terms of how we coach today, because most business owners, we just started coaching the business owner and not the key leaders. Well, with you guys, we started coaching the leader, the quote, the owner, the treasurer, and with George and Kimberly, coached the entire key leadership team together. And it was a powerful mix out of the gate, because I realized, it took me probably a year to realize this, is that we had the visionary in the room, that's you, but then we also had those, you called them doers, the integrators, the implementers, to be able to take the vision that the leader cast and then go actually put it down on spreadsheets or put it down in team meetings or whatever. So I want you to talk about a couple of the things when you look back over the last 3 or 4 years that you and Kimberly and George systematically, methodically, thoughtfully began to start doing so that you could really own the treasurer's office rather than the treasurer's office or even the larger bureaucracy of the county owning you. So what were those systematic things, those thoughtful things that you had the vision for, but Kimberly and George were really implementing day to day?
The first thing is definitely going to be our turnover. We have, this is just an acknowledgement that we're really proud of. We have a much higher level of standards for our team members than a typical government. We expect professionalism, accuracy. We run our team as if it is a private sector. And I have to say, I think we might be even better than that sometimes. And we're really proud of that. So when people would come join our team, they would be shocked at the amount of work. They expected typical government work, and we're not a typical government office. So we had a lot of turnover as a result of that. And when we first started working with you, that was a huge focus. How can we invest in our team and our team members so that they feel valued and equipped to do what we're asking, instead of looking at it as, oh, you can't do the task, so you're not doing the task at our standard, okay, you're fired, or just move on. No. Are you coachable? Because we'll invest in you. I'll give you every resource you possibly need to do this, what we're asking you to do. I think that's my responsibility as a leader. And that was the springboard, I think, when we first started working with you, like our first major achievement. We went from, in one role, a 70 to 80% turnover rate to 0 within 12 months. And we went through, my leadership team and I, George, Kimberly and I, we went through, okay, what value, aside from salary, because we are limited in what we can offer as a government and any organization.
That's a very important thing to note, by the way. You guys cannot do many of the things that the private sector can do. So you had to be very novel and very innovative in terms of how you motivated people.
Yes. Yeah, bonuses, sales quota. We can't do any of that. So we needed to show in other ways that we cared about them as a person, made them feel included. And our culture today is so different than that. So then we got past that, and I think our second major milestone was, our goal had always been, okay, let's stop the turnover, because so much work when you have an employee leave. It doesn't matter whether they're good or bad. It is a lot of work. How do we just kept focusing on stopping the turnover. Well, hello, the majority of the workforce is millennials. What do? They don't stay at jobs very long. So we shifted our thought process from, let's stop people leaving and make them help, encourage them to stay, to, let's prepare for everyone to leave within 24 months of being hired. Plan on everybody leaving, because that's probably the reality of, no one's working for fun. Most of us aren't. People are working because they want to earn a paycheck to enjoy their lives, take care of their loved ones, enjoy life. They're not working for fun. They're working to pay for the fun they do elsewhere. And so what can we do to make that a great experience while they're with us? And that was just, an earth-shattering concept for us. That really changed our entire trajectory after that.
Yeah. Well, and it allowed Kimberly and George to really sink their teeth into something that was kind of novel and different, but it wasn't so crazy that you couldn't do anything with it. Because the reality is, turnover in those kind of government positions are typically high anyway. So there's really nothing to lose with that mindset. The irony is that mindset has actually led you into a more, and I can say this, but it's led you into a more capable team member in terms of just raw capabilities, and then also more of an enthusiastic team member. You've had people that have left other positions in other places to come work for you, and in some cases make less money because of the constrictions that you guys have on that. And so you've done a really nice, novel job of not only marrying the systems processes that we talk about all the time, but you actually brought it into a novel concept. Well, what if we changed the thinking around hiring completely and did kind of a 180? So you've worked really hard in the last few years to build a lot of that out. It's not led to a life of ease just tubing down the river. It's led to a next mountain, to these next mountains that you've got. So what do you feel like in your role right now is the next big mountain that you and Kimberly and George as a team with the other team members that you've got? So the office in general, what's the big next mountain you feel like it's time to climb?
It's amazing because I don't think I would have answered this question too much differently before coronavirus as I'm going to now, because I think that's where our team is right now. we're always thinking of the next thing. And that next thing was going to be, how do we leverage technology more to be a more appealing employer? So telecommuting options and flex work schedules, that sort of thing, which we were, almost everybody was forced to do now in the past few months. And how do we leverage technology to provide better service to our customers? You don't have to walk into our office to accomplish what you need to. So that would have been my answer before, and it's still my answer now. I think what's going to make the mountain a little more difficult to scale is we're dealing with a virus, and obviously most of us probably prefer not to get it. So how do we keep our team members who deal directly with members of the public, and we're talking hundreds of people every day on a typical day? It's not just you left your house to go to the grocery store once and came home. That is a lot of people to interact with. And that has been a struggle over the past couple weeks to, how do you return to normal? What does that normal look like? And what are people's expectations of normal? Because there's a lot of people realize that probably means less in-person contact, doing things remotely, by phone, if possible. But then there are other people who think, okay, there's no more quarantine. The old normal is the normal. And they want to be able to come in. They don't like the plexiglass. They don't want to wear a mask. And it is a challenge. And I think that's a challenge for our customer-facing team. And as leaders, our challenge is to support them. Lead, show them where we're going. What is the vision, right? Vision, mission, values. What's the vision? And now, what do you need from me? What can I do for you? What can I provide, offer, support, so that you work towards that vision of service that we have for you? And we are still implementing kiosks. We should have payment kiosks installed later this week, so that we're limiting in-person contact. And we really had to take a strong look at what our office hours are. We've never had an opportunity to see the number of staff we employ just for walk-in transactions. We went from an 11-person team to 6 by not having walk-in hours. That was an eye-opener. And you talk about 6 salaries. And I love my team. But I also have a responsibility to our taxpayers to be as efficient with their tax dollars as possible. So is that efficient? Is it safe? Just navigating that dynamics, I think that is our next mountain.
Well, and the thing that is so interesting to think about is, again, we think about local county work, local county office, and novelty is not a word that we think about in terms of coming up with new innovative ideas. And I was even sitting here thinking, as you were talking, this is a most bizarre question. What did Twitter, Facebook, and the Beaufort County Treasurer's Office have in common? Like, that's crazy to be asking that question. But when we talk about, things like remote work, and those are going to become, you guys were doing that well before COVID. In fact, you guys have been doing that in the last few years. And you went to a paperless office. You went to remote work. You guys have already started to do those things, even while there were people within the same county that not only have not done those things, but they're just not really interested in doing those things. And so I was listening to an interview the other day with the president of Arizona State University, which has been rated as the most innovative university in the last 6 years, every year for the last 6 years. And the president basically said this was the person who was asking him said, do you think that universities are going to have to get on board now? And the ASU president said, basically, when COVID hit, it was the equivalent of somebody asking all the university presidents, are you listening now? Are you listening now? And so you guys were on that largely because, and even to hear you say vision, mission, values, a lot of times people will think Oh yeah. I've heard about that. No, you guys have actually implemented it. And the irony is that not only have you implemented it, but when I ask you your next mountain to climb, guess what you say? Vision, mission, values. It's the same thing, but on repeat.
Yeah.
Talk briefly about the importance of not only having a written vision, set of mission, or a mission and a set of values, but the importance of repeating those things over and over again and going back to them.
You're giving me goosebumps because I'm thinking as you're asking, I mean, vision, not having a vision, mission, values for your organization is like not knowing who you are as a person. It is the equivalent. You don't know who you are as an organization. How do you benchmark? How do you benchmark your decisions if you don't know who you are? How do you decide what you do next if you don't know who you are? How do you decide what you're capable of if you don't know who you are? And if you don't know who you are, you certainly don't have any idea on where you want to go. And so to me, vision, mission, values, it tells the world who you are, where you're going, and how you're going to get there. What are the guiding principles that are going to carry you through the process of getting there? It's ingrained in our team meetings. It's ingrained in our situations, positive and negative. What, this didn't align with this value. It even unknowingly, which is interesting, I was working with a vendor a few months ago, and he said something to me that I didn't even recognize. The business owner, the vendor, said, "Well, Maria, this is going great because our vision and our values align." And I thought, because we were just having the most incredible, they're great to work with. They handled things the way I would have handled them. It's been a great relationship. And even though I am laser focused on vision, mission, values all the time throughout our team, I failed to recognize that carried over to even our vendors. And it made me reflect on the different relationships, because we work with a lot of different businesses, not just taxpayers.
Mm-hmm.
The entities that we have the most successful working relationship with are the ones that have their own vision, mission, values, and they know who they are and they align with ours. Are they innovative? All of that.
Yeah. Well, and the thing I want to highlight too is you said embedded, and really what you mean is repeated. You say these things over and over and over again. You actually use mission in your team meetings. You use the core values in your team meetings. I hear George is obsessed with it. And he'll say, well, according to this core value of blank, he's got them posted on his wall. He repeats them in team meetings and huddles. We've actually sat in on a live huddle. We had a whole room, 100 plus people sitting in on a live huddle that Kimberly led, which was amazing, at one of our 12-week plan live events. And it was so neat to hear your team use the core values in the huddle. And so you had 100 plus business owners and key leaders listening to a bureaucracy, I tease you guys all the time that you're the most hated profession in all human antiquity, tax collectors, basically. But what you've done is you've taken this idea of vision, mission, values, and you've completely gone 180 degrees. So, hey, Maria, we ask every single person we talk to, what's a piece of wisdom? And you're a wisdom lady. You want wisdom. You gather wisdom. You go on the hunt for it. I don't know if it's from your childhood or if it's from recent experience, but what's a piece of wisdom that you've been taught that you can share with us?
When you have a decision to make, it could be little, but usually they're big ones. And whether you're a praying person or not, I certainly pray if I have a big decision to make. But I think the biggest piece of wisdom I've learned from this experience these past 9 years is when I feel I have a decision to make and it's not clear which way to go, but there's that pressure as a leader. You need to do something. You need to make a decision. Sometimes that's the right time to take a step back and give it a rest for a minute. Sometimes space from something, no matter the urgency, space from something will give you more clarity than you continually being right on top of it.
Hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yes. And I've got
And
a
I would
stream
imagine a lot
of
of leaders are
conversations that
probably
we've had.
yeah.
Yeah.
There's a lot of pressure to be a leader. It's not just the owner of a business. I mean, there's leaders up and down the chain of command. There's a lot of pressure and a lot of triumph that can come from being a leader. And sometimes that means taking a step back so you have time to reflect and get some clarity on something before rushing through. That's been a really great thing I've learned.
Wow. Well, it's super helpful. It's interesting. A guy named John Eldredge, who wrote a great book called Get Your Life Back, Wild at Heart, some others. He and his team recently built an app called the Pause app. And it lines so well with what you're talking about in the face of the decision. But essentially what you said was just pause and take a deep breath. And I was just reading a book yesterday, and they're talking about combat breathing, and apparently what Navy SEALs do when they get in the midst of a firefight is they start to breathe really slow, 4 seconds in, 4 seconds out. And it's that same idea of just pause just for a second, just for a moment, because when we do that, it starts to re-articulate our thoughts into what we're doing. Maria, you have done such great work, you and Kimberly and George all together, but it's not without your vision being able to lead this. And it's been our delight to be able to just be a part of this over the last few years and going forward, and where you're headed and that mountain to climb. It, as you well know, it excites me to climb mountains and also to be a Sherpa on these mountains of sorts. But we could not be more proud of you, what you're doing, of the family you and Rich are building, but also the team that you're building at the Treasurer's Office. So I just want to tell you publicly, congratulations.
Thank you. I'm blessed with a lot of great people around me.